The massive holographic display crackled to life across the galaxy, its blue light filling command centers, government buildings, and public squares on 10,000 different worlds. Ambassador Velthani of the Andorian Federation stood at the central podium, her usually calm crystalline features twisted with barely controlled fear. Her 4 hands trembled as she gripped the emergency protocol datapad, the device's red warning lights casting an ominous glow across her pale blue skin. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying across space through quantum relays to every inhabited system. "I speak to you now under Emergency Protocol 7. What I am about to tell you will change everything we thought we knew about our place in this galaxy." Behind her, the massive screens displayed grainy surveillance footage that made seasoned military officers across the galaxy lean forward in their chairs. The images showed human vessels moving through space in ways that defied all known physics and survival protocols. Ships that should have been crushed by gravitational forces sailed smoothly between massive asteroids. Crews worked outside their vessels in the hard vacuum of space with the casual efficiency of beings taking a morning walk. 3 standard cycles ago, Velthani continued, the Council voted to implement permanent quarantine protocols around human space. We believed, as we have always believed, that the humans of Sol 3 were too dangerous to be allowed free movement through civilized space. We thought we were protecting ourselves from the infamous DEATHWORLDERS. The footage shifted to show a human commander standing on the outer hull of his warship, directing fleet movements through hand signals while cosmic radiation that would kill most species in seconds seemed to have no effect on him at all. Commander James Mitchell moved with purpose and control, his environmental suit more decoration than necessity as he coordinated battle formations and conditions that registered as immediately lethal on every alien scanner. "The humans have responded to our quarantine with a message that has shaken the very foundations of our understanding," Velthani said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They have officially declared the entire galactic community as legitimate military targets." Gasps echoed through council chambers across the galaxy. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Thorian workers stopped their excavation equipment to stare at public screens. In the crystal cities of New Arcturus, the normally unflappable Centaurian leadership exchanged worried glances. Even the ancient vegan collective, who had seen empires rise and fall for millennia, felt a chill of genuine fear. The surveillance feed continued to roll, showing scene after scene of impossible human capabilities. A human engineer named Robert Hayes worked alone to repair a massive hull breach, his hands moving steadily as he welded metal plates in place while floating in the killing cold of deep space. Another clip showed Captain Emma Brooks walking through a radiation field that measured beyond the maximum limits of most species detection equipment, her readings steady and normal as she inspected damage to her ship's outer sensors. "For 200 years, Velthani explained, we have watched the humans with a mixture of fascination and terror. Their homeworld is a nightmare of extreme weather, dangerous predators, and toxic environments. They evolved in conditions that would exterminate any of our species within hours. We called them DEATHWORLDERS because we believed they brought death wherever they went." The ambassador paused, her breathing shallow as she prepared to deliver the most disturbing revelation. "We were wrong. The death was never coming from them. It was coming toward us and they were standing in the way." New footage appeared on the screens, classified material that had been hidden in the deepest vaults of Council intelligence. Images of massive alien constructs moving between stars, their designs so foreign that most viewers could not even understand what they were looking at. Creatures that existed in the dark spaces between solar systems, their forms shifting and writhing with malevolent purpose. And in every image, small human vessels engaging these nightmares in battles that raged across empty space. "These are the Void Hunters," Velthani said, her voice barely audible now. "For 2 centuries they have been pressing against the outer rim of our galaxy, seeking to consume everything in their path. And for 2 centuries human deep space reconnaissance teams have been fighting them alone, in secret, asking nothing from us in return." The footage showed Captain Rebecca Stone's fleet engaging a Void Hunter hive ship near the Magellanic Clouds. Human vessels, tiny compared to the kilometer-long alien nightmare, moved with deadly precision through weapons fire that turned space itself into a burning hell. The humans fought not with the desperate fury of cornered animals, but with the calm professionalism of experienced guardians protecting something precious. "While we debated their dangerous nature in these very chambers," Velthani continued, "Commander David Turner was preventing stellar collapses that would have destroyed entire systems. While we passed resolutions about their violent tendencies, Lieutenant Sophie Grant was holding the line against threats we never even knew existed." The final piece of footage showed the aftermath of a battle near the galactic rim. A human medical ship moved between the wreckage of both human and alien vessels, its crew working tirelessly to save survivors from both sides of a conflict that had raged in the darkness beyond known space. The humans treated their enemies with the same care they showed their own wounded, their actions speaking of a moral code that transcended species boundaries. "They have declared us valid targets," Velthani said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Not because they wish to conquer us, but because we have forced them to treat us as enemies instead of the civilizations they have died to protect." The holographic display flickered and went dark, leaving billions of beings across the galaxy sitting in stunned silence, finally understanding that their greatest protectors had been hiding in plain sight, branded as monsters while they stood guard against the real darkness that waited beyond the stars. The warning sirens fell silent across the Balerian defense stations as Captain Emma Brooks stepped out of her shuttle onto the main docking bay. The artificial gravity felt strange under her boots after 6 hours of zero-G combat maneuvers, but she moved with the easy confidence of someone who had spent more time in space than on solid ground. Behind her, the sleek form of the HMS Defiance hung in the void like a predator at rest, its hull scarred from battles the Balerians could not even imagine. Admiral Wilson of the Balerian Defense Force waited at the airlock, his 6 arms trembling despite his efforts to appear calm. His large black eyes, evolved for the dim light of his homeworld, struggled to adjust to the bright illumination that humans preferred. Everything about Captain Brooks seemed wrong to his senses. She moved too quickly, breathed too deeply, and showed no signs of stress despite the fact that she had just spent hours in conditions that would have killed any Balerian in minutes. "Captain Brooks," Admiral Wilson said, his translator device giving his words a mechanical tone. "Your demonstration was quite effective. My defense counsel wishes to discuss terms." Emma smiled, the expression looking predatory to the nervous alien commander. "Terms? We're not here to negotiate, Admiral. We're here to show you what happens when you mistake Guardians for monsters." Through the massive viewports that lined the docking bay, both species could see the evidence of human capabilities scattered across the asteroid field. Lieutenant Thomas Reed floated near a disabled defense satellite, his environmental suit glowing with radiation warnings as he carefully rewired the alien technology. The radiation levels would have cooked a Balerian in seconds, but Reed worked with the patience of an artist, his movements steady and precise. "How is he still alive?" Wilson whispered, staring at the readings on his personal scanner. "The radiation from that satellite should have killed him 10 times over." Emma glanced at the display with casual interest. "Tommy? He's fine. This is actually pretty mild compared to some of the work sites we've dealt with. Last month he spent 3 days repairing a fusion reactor while it was still running. Had to work inside the containment field itself." Wilson's translator struggled with several untranslatable sounds of distress. On his homeworld, radiation exposure was measured in fractions of seconds. The idea of someone working for days in lethal conditions was beyond his comprehension. Across the bay, Sergeant Lisa Hamilton was demonstrating another impossibility. She had jury-rigged an atmospheric processor using spare parts from her toolkit, creating breathable air in a section of the station that had been vented to space during the brief skirmish. The device hummed quietly as it worked, converting the thin traces of gas that remained in the damaged compartment into something the Balerian survivors could breathe. "Your Sergeant," Wilson said, pointing with one of his secondary arms. "She built that machine from scrap metal in under an hour. Our best engineers said it would take days to restore atmosphere to that section." Emma shrugged. "Lisa's good with her hands. You should see what she can do when she has proper tools and materials. She once built a complete life support system from the wreckage of a crashed ship. Kept 200 civilians alive for 6 weeks while waiting for rescue." The Balerian admiral felt something cold settle in his stomach. These humans spoke of impossible feats as if they were routine maintenance tasks. They discussed survival in conditions that would exterminate his entire species with the same tone others might use to describe the weather. "Captain," Wilson said carefully, "I must ask. The Council's report said your species was primitive and violent. They said you were barely capable of space travel. But what I'm seeing here..." Emma's expression hardened. "The Council saw what they wanted to see. They looked at our military ships and our weapons and decided we were dangerous. They never bothered to ask why we built those ships or who we were fighting." She gestured toward the viewports, where the human fleet hung in perfect formation around the surrendering Balerian forces. Each ship bore the scars of countless battles, their hulls marked with impact craters and radiation burns that told stories of conflicts fought in the dark spaces between stars. "For 200 years, we've been fighting things that would give your people nightmares," Emma continued. "While your council debated whether we were civilized enough to trade with, Captain Rebecca Stone was holding the line against void hunters near the Magellanic Clouds. While they passed resolutions about our violent nature, Commander David Turner was preventing stellar collapses that would have wiped out entire systems. Wilson's translator produced a series of clicking sounds as he processed this information. The void hunters are real? We thought they were myths, stories told to frighten children. They're real, Emma said quietly. And they're hungry. The only reason your children still have stories to be frightened by is because human children grew up learning to fight monsters in the dark. Lieutenant Reed finished his work on the defense satellite and pushed off from its surface, drifting slowly back toward the main station. His radiation badge, clearly visible through his helmet, glowed with warning colors that indicated exposure levels far beyond anything the Balerians considered survivable. Yet he moved with casual ease, already planning his next task. Your terms, Captain, Wilson said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma turned to face him fully, and for a moment the Balerian admiral saw something in her eyes that made him understand why the galaxy had called her species DEATHWORLDERS. It wasn't cruelty or aggression. It was the absolute certainty of someone who had stared into the abyss and decided to stand guard so others wouldn't have to. We don't want your surrender, Admiral, she said. We want your understanding. The galaxy declared war on its protectors. Now you get to see what the universe looks like when the Guardians stop pretending to be harmless. Dr. Robert Hayes stood before the emergency session of the subcouncil, his weathered face calm despite the chaos erupting around him. 17 worlds had surrendered to human forces without firing a single shot, and the alien delegates filled the chamber with panicked chittering, clicking, and harmonic wails that their translators struggled to convert into coherent speech. The elderly human scientist waited patiently as the fear-driven noise gradually died down, his hands clasped behind his back in a pose that suggested infinite patience. You called this emergency session to understand what humanity wants, Hayes said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. But you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking what you've thrown away. Ambassador Keth Moore of the Centaurian Alliance leaned forward in his floating chair, his massive head tilting in confusion. Dr. Hayes, your species has declared war on the entire galactic community. 17 worlds have fallen to your forces in less than a standard week. How can you stand there and speak of what we have lost? Hayes activated the holographic projector built into the speaker's podium, and the chamber filled with images that made several delegates recoil in horror. The footage showed massive alien constructs moving through deep space, their surfaces writhing with organic components that pulsed with malevolent life. Ships the size of moons drifted between stars, leaving trails of destruction that stretched across entire solar systems. These are void hunters, Hayes explained, his tone remaining conversational despite the nightmare images surrounding him. For the past 2 centuries, they have been pressing against the outer rim of our galaxy, seeking to consume everything in their path. The reason you've never heard of them is because human deep space reconnaissance teams have been fighting them in secret, asking nothing from any of you in return. The projection shifted to show battle footage that made even the most experienced military officers in the chamber feel sick. Human vessels, tiny compared to the alien monstrosities, engaged in running battles across the void between galaxies. Captain Rebecca Stone's fleet moved through weapons fire that turned space itself into a burning hell's cape, their ships weaving between energy beams that could crack planets. While your council spent decades debating whether humanity was civilized enough to join your trade networks, Hayes continued, Captain Stone and her crews were preventing the complete extinction of everything you hold dear. She died 3 years ago holding the line at Kepler 442, buying time for evacuation ships to escape a void hunter assault fleet. Delegate Zarvex of the Triangulum Collective made a sound like breaking glass. But the reports said humans were primitive warmongers. Your technology was barely advanced enough for basic space travel. How could you fight threats we had never encountered? Hayes smiled grimly and activated another set of images. These showed human crews working in conditions that registered as immediately lethal on every scanner in the chamber. Engineers repaired fusion reactors while they were still running, their environmental suits glowing with radiation warnings. Medical teams operated in the vacuum of space, performing emergency surgery on wounded crew members using equipment that functioned in absolute zero temperatures. Your mistake was measuring our advancement by your standards, Hayes explained. You build comfortable ships for comfortable species living comfortable lives. We build ships that can function when everything goes wrong, crewed by people who consider impossible conditions just another day at the office. The projection showed Commander David Turner standing on the hull of his ship near a collapsing star, his instruments measuring gravitational distortions that would have crushed any other vessel. He worked calmly to deploy a stellar stabilizer, his movements precise and professional as reality warped around him. The star, which should have gone nova and destroyed 3 inhabited systems, gradually returned to stable fusion. Commander Turner prevented 17 stellar collapses last year alone, Hayes said. Each one would have wiped out billions of lives. He treated it as routine maintenance work. When he submitted his reports to the Council's Scientific Review Board, they were filed under unsubstantiated claims because your experts said the technology was impossible. Ambassador Velthani, who had delivered the original emergency broadcast, stood from her seat with visible effort. Dr. Hayes, if what you're showing us is true, then humanity has been protecting the galaxy for centuries. Why did you never tell us? Why maintain such secrecy? Hayes turned to look directly at her, and she flinched from the intensity in his eyes. We tried. For 50 years we tried to warn you about the threats gathering beyond the rim. Every report was dismissed as primitive fear-mongering. Every offer of assistance was rejected because we weren't advanced enough to understand what we were seeing. Eventually we stopped asking for permission and started doing what needed to be done. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The projection now showed a human medical ship moving through the aftermath of a battle between human forces and some unidentifiable alien threat. The crew worked tirelessly to save survivors from both sides, treating their enemies with the same care they showed their own wounded. Lieutenant Sophie Grant runs the Deep Space Medical Corps, Hayes explained. She's saved more alien lives than most of your species have even met. Last month, she spent 18 hours in open surgery on a Thorian mining crew that was caught in a Void Hunter probe attack. She didn't ask about their species' stance on humanity. She just saw people who needed help. Delegate Morkes of the Vegan Collective, ancient even by their species' standards, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. Then why declare us valid targets? If you have been our protectors, why turn against us now? Hayes deactivated the projector, leaving the chamber in sudden darkness except for the emergency lighting. Because you didn't just reject our help, he said quietly. You branded us as monsters and locked us away. The Void Hunters are gathering for their largest assault in 3 centuries, and you just told your only defense force that we're the enemy. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several delegates quietly weeping for a galaxy they were just beginning to understand they had already lost. Admiral Peter Collins walked through the rebuilt council chambers with measured steps, his dress uniform bearing ribbons and medals that told stories most of the assembled delegates had never heard. The massive hall, reconstructed after the emergency sessions of the previous months, could hold representatives from over 1,000 worlds. Today, every seat was filled, and the air hummed with tension so thick it seemed to press against the walls. The Admiral carried a single data cylinder in his left hand, its surface gleaming under the chamber's bright lights. The small device contained information that would either save the galaxy or confirm its doom. Behind him, Captain Andrew Foster and Lieutenant Sophie Grant stood at attention, their own uniforms displaying the scars of battles fought in the darkness between stars. Delegates of the Galactic Council, Collins began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space, I stand before you today not as a conqueror, but as someone who has spent 40 years watching good people die to protect civilizations that considered them monsters. He placed the data cylinder on the speaker's podium with deliberate care. The small gesture sent ripples of nervous energy through the assembled crowd. Several delegates leaned forward in their seats, while others seemed to shrink back as if the device might explode. This cylinder contains evidence of 47 major extinction-level threats that human forces have neutralized over the past century, Collins announced. Threats you never knew existed because we made sure they never reached your worlds. The chamber's holographic systems activated, filling the air above the delegates with images that made even the most battle-hardened military officers among them feel sick. Massive structures moved through the void between galaxies, their surfaces crawling with organic technology that seemed to pulse with hungry life. Planet-sized entities drifted through space, leaving dead systems in their wake where entire worlds had been stripped down to their molten cores. The Void Hunters, Collins explained, represent just one category of threat. There are others. The Stellar Devourers feed on the fusion fires of living stars. The Shadow Collective exists partially outside normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to detect until they strike. The machine hegemony converts entire civilizations into components for their expanding network. Ambassador Keth Moore of the Centaurian Alliance spoke with a trembling voice. Admiral Collins, if these threats are real, how have we never encountered them? Collins gestured to Lieutenant Grant, who stepped forward with practiced precision. Lieutenant Grant has personally engaged Shadow Collective infiltrators 17 times in the past 5 years. Each time they were attempting to establish beachheads in populated systems. She stopped them before they could begin converting your people into their hybrid servants. The projection shifted to show Grant's medical ship, the HMS Mercy, engaged in what looked like a battle against empty space. Energy weapons fired at targets that flickered in and out of visibility, while her crew worked frantically to seal dimensional rifts that threatened to tear holes in reality itself. Last year alone, Collins continued, Colonel Mary Johnson and her deep space reconnaissance teams prevented 3 separate stellar devourer incursions into the Orion Arm. Each one would have consumed between 15 and 30 star systems before we could have organized any meaningful resistance. The images now showed human vessels working inside the coronas of living stars, their crews deploying devices that looked impossibly fragile against the nuclear fury surrounding them. Colonel Johnson herself could be seen directing operations while standing on her ship's hull, the stellar radiation that surrounded her registering at levels that would have vaporized most known materials. Your species consider our environmental tolerances to be evidence of primitive brutality, Collins said, his tone remaining calm despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. The truth is that we evolved on a world that prepared us to fight in conditions where most life cannot exist. While you built comfortable civilizations on garden worlds, we learned to thrive in the places where the real predators hunt. Delegate Zarvex of the Triangulum Collective made a sound like breaking crystal. But why maintain such secrecy? Why not inform the Council of these threats? Captain Foster spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent in command. We tried, sir. For over 50 years, we submitted detailed reports about Void Hunter movements, Stellar Devourer feeding patterns, and Shadow Collective infiltration attempts. Every report was filed under unsubstantiated claims because your scientific communities declared our observations impossible. The projection changed again, this time showing archived footage of human delegations attempting to address various council committees. Dr. Robert Hayes, 20 years younger, stood before a panel of alien scientists, desperately trying to explain the threat posed by the machine hegemony. The alien delegates looked bored, dismissive, some even openly laughing at his warnings. We stopped asking for permission, Collins said quietly, and started doing what needed to be done. The alternative was watching entire sectors fall to threats you refused to acknowledge existed. The chamber fell silent as the final images played. These showed the aftermath of battles fought beyond the galactic rim, where human ships moved through debris fields that stretched for light years. The wreckage included vessels of unknown origin, their technology so advanced that even human scientists struggled to understand how they functioned. The Void Hunters are mobilizing their largest assault fleet in 3 centuries, Collins announced, his words dropping into the silence like stones into still water. Our long-range scouts estimate they will reach the outer settlements within 18 standard months. Without human forces standing guard at the rim, that fleet will sweep through populated space like a wildfire through dry grass. He looked across the assembled delegates, his gaze steady and unflinching. You have a choice to make. You can continue to treat humanity as your enemy and discover what this galaxy looks like without us standing guard against the darkness. Or you can acknowledge what we have always been, your first and last line of defense against extinction. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the chamber's life support systems, as 1,000 civilizations contemplated the price of their prejudice and the cost of their survival. Captain Andrew Foster stood on the bridge of the HMS Unity, watching through the massive viewports as the most ambitious fleet in galactic history prepared for departure. 6 months had passed since Admiral Collins delivered humanity's ultimatum to the Council, and the universe had changed in ways that still seemed impossible to believe. Alien vessels moved in formation alongside human ships, their crews finally working together as equals rather than victims and protectors. Void Hunter signatures are getting stronger, reported Lieutenant Sophie Grant from her monitoring station. Her fingers danced across controls that had been modified to accommodate both human and alien interfaces. 3 more incursion points detected in Sector 7. They're testing our outer defenses. Foster nodded, his eyes tracking the movement of ships that represented dozens of different species. The Centaurian heavy cruiser Starfall moved with surprising grace despite its massive bulk, its crew having spent months learning to operate in the harsh conditions that humans considered routine. Beside it, the sleek Balerian science vessel Discovery bristled with sensors designed to detect the dimensional distortions that preceded Void Hunter attacks. Captain Foster, came a voice from behind him, still carrying the mechanical tone of a translator device. The Joint Fleet reports ready for deployment. Foster turned to face his new first officer, Commander Kexdal of the Andromedian Federation. The alien officer stood nearly 7 feet tall, her crystalline skin reflecting the bridge lighting in patterns that indicated deep concentration. She wore the same environmental suit that all non-human crew members required, the advanced technology allowing her species to survive in the atmospheric conditions that humans preferred. "How are your people adjusting to the new protocols?" Foster asked, gesturing toward the mixed crew that now operated the bridge stations. Kexdal's skin shifted to show patterns that the translation software interpreted as cautious optimism. "Better than expected, Captain. Though I admit, watching Sergeant Hamilton perform maintenance in hard vacuum still makes my survival instincts scream warnings." Through the viewports they could see exactly what she meant. Sergeant Lisa Hamilton floated between two ships, welding reinforcement plates onto a Thorian vessel that had suffered damage during training exercises. The radiation levels around her would have killed any Thorian in seconds, but she worked with the same casual efficiency she had always shown, her movements precise and professional. "Lisa's been doing EVA work for 15 years, Foster said with a slight smile. "She once told me that working in space was more relaxing than her childhood home on Mars." Said the radiation levels were lower. The comment drew a sound from Kexdal that the translator couldn't interpret, probably some form of alien amazement or horror. Foster had grown used to such reactions over the past months as the different species learned to work together. "Captain," Lieutenant Grant called from her station, "long-range scouts are reporting massive energy signatures near the galactic rim. It looks like the main Void Hunter fleet is beginning to move." Foster felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. The enemy they had fought in secret for 2 centuries was finally making its decisive push into populated space. This time, however, humanity would not stand alone against the darkness. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships prepare for faster-than-light jump to the outer rim. It's time to show the galaxy what real cooperation looks like." The bridge hummed with activity as crew members from half a dozen different species worked together to prepare for departure. At the weapons station, a young human ensign named Tom Bradley worked alongside a vegan technician whose species had survived for millennia through careful diplomacy rather than warfare. The aliens' ancient wisdom combined with human tactical aggression created strategies that neither species could have developed alone. "Jump coordinates locked in," reported the navigation officer, a Balerian whose large eyes allowed him to process the complex calculations required for fleet-wide faster-than-light travel. "All ships report ready." Foster looked once more through the viewports at the assembled fleet. Human dreadnoughts bristled with weapons designed to function in the hellish conditions near the galactic rim. Alien science vessels carried sensors sensitive enough to detect threats hiding in the spaces between dimensions. Medical ships from a dozen different worlds stood ready to treat casualties from species they had only recently learned existed. "The emergency broadcast," Kexdal said quietly, referring to the transmission that had declared humanity a threat to all galactic civilization. "It plays in our museums now, as a reminder of how fear can blind entire civilizations to the truth." Foster remembered that broadcast, remembered the terror in Ambassador Velthani's voice as she announced that the DEATHWORLDERS had declared war on everyone. Now Velthani served as the Council's liaison to the Joint Fleet, her expertise in interspecies communication proving invaluable in coordinating the defense of civilized space. "Fear makes us stupid," Foster agreed. "But courage makes us strong. And cooperation makes us unstoppable." The fleet's faster-than-light drives engaged simultaneously, creating a light show that could be seen from the surface of nearby worlds. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species vanished into the void, carrying their crews toward the darkness that waited beyond the rim of known space. As the HMS Unity slipped through the folded dimensions of faster-than-light travel, Foster reflected on how much had changed since the Council's vote to quarantine human space. They had tried to cage their guardians and instead discovered what the universe looked like when monsters were allowed to pretend they were the heroes of the story. Now the real monsters were coming, and the galaxy finally understood the difference between those who brought darkness and those who stood against it. The emergency broadcast that once declared humanity a threat had become a historical artifact, a reminder of the day the universe learned that its greatest protectors had been hiding in plain sight all along. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and for the first time in 2 centuries humanity would not fight alone.